Part 2 Story, The Rules of Blackwood Peak. I watched the faceless man in the ranger uniform stand at the edge of the trees for a long time. He didn't move. He didn't blink, he couldn't, he had no eyes. He just stood there, his hand raised in that frozen, mocking wave, staring up at me with a blank slate of flesh. Eventually, he took a slow step backward into the dense pine shadows and vanished. I didn't wait. Panic, cold and sharp, finally snapped me out of my paralysis. I grabbed my backpack. I didn't bother packing clothes or food. I just shoved my wallet and the keys into my pocket, grabbed the heavy flashlight, and scrambled for the trapdoor. I unlocked the deadbolt and threw it open. The wind howled up the shaft, smelling of ozone and wet rot. I practically slid down the spiral staircase, my boots clanging loudly against the metal. When I hit the dirt, I didn't look for footprints. I didn't look at the handprints on the struts. I just ran. I ran toward the trail Holloway had driven us up. I knew the way. It was a wide fire road. It should have been impossible to miss. But after 20 minutes of sprinting, my lungs burning, I skidded to a halt. There was no road. I was standing in a dense thicket of thorns and ancient oaks. The trees here looked wrong. Their trunks were twisted, spiraling upward like wrung-out rags. The ground was covered in a thick carpet of gray moss that dampened every sound. I spun around, trying to orient myself. The sun was directly overhead, but the light was weak, filtered through a haze that hadn't been there a moment ago. I pulled out my compass. The needle was spinning wildly, unwilling to settle on north. Lost. I was lost on a road that was supposed to be wide enough for a truck. Then I heard it. A branch snapping. It came from behind a cluster of boulders to my left. Hello? I called out. Holloway? No answer. Just the sound of heavy, wet breathing. I shone my flashlight toward the rocks, even though it was day. The beam cut through the gloom. Something pale moved behind the boulders. It moved low to the ground, on all fours, but the way its joints bent was all wrong. Knees popping upward, elbows jutting out at sharp angles. I backed away slowly. Rule number, something. Holloway had said it. Don't feed the wildlife. The thing behind the rock let out a sound. It wasn't a growl. It was a giggle. A high-pitched, childish giggle that sounded like it was coming from a throat filled with gravel. I turned and ran back the way I came. I didn't care if I was running uphill. I just needed to get away from that sound. I ran until my legs gave out. I collapsed, gasping for air, and looked up. I was back at the base of the tower. I had run in a straight line away from it, and yet, here I was. The steel skeleton loomed over me, silent and inevitable. The sun was already dipping below the horizon. The day had passed in what felt like an hour. I had no choice. The woods weren't safe. The tower was a cage, but it was a cage with a lock. I climbed the 60 feet of stairs, my hands shaking so hard I almost slipped twice. I vaulted into the cabin, slammed the trapdoor shut, and threw the deadbolt. Then I dragged the heavy metal desk across the room and parked it right on top of the trapdoor. I sat on the cot, clutching the flashlight, watching the light fade. That was when the moon rose. It crested the mountains like a swollen sore. It wasn't white or yellow. It was a deep, crimson red. The light it cast turned the inside of the cabin into a slaughterhouse. Rule 2. Do not look at the moon if it appears red. I scrambled off the cot. I didn't have curtains, the tower was designed for visibility. I grabbed my sleeping bag, my spare clothes, anything I could find. I used duct tape from the supply drawer to tape them over the windows. I worked feverishly, trying not to look outside, trying not to see the red light bathing the trees. When the last window was covered, the room plunged into darkness. I didn't turn on the lantern. I just sat in the corner, knees to my chest. Then the scratching started again. But it wasn't just on the windows this time. Scritch. Scritch. It was coming from the floor. specifically from the grate of the trapdoor underneath the heavy desk. Something was climbing the stairs. Elias? The voice came from beneath the floorboards. It wasn't the radio this time. It was real. Open the door, Elias. The moon is so beautiful. It sounded like my mother. She had been dead for 10 years. I clamped my hands over my ears and squeezed my eyes shut. Rule 1. Keep the trapdoor locked. Especially if it sounds like someone you know. Mom? I whispered, before I could stop myself. The scratching stopped. Yes, baby. It's me. I brought you some soup. It's cold out here. Just open the latch. Tears streamed down my face. I knew it wasn't her. But the voice, it broke my heart. Go away! I screamed. The voice changed instantly. It reverted to that deep, strange growl I'd heard on the radio. Open the door, or I'll peel this tower like a banana. The tower shuddered. The metal groaned. It felt as if a giant hand had grabbed the steel girders 60 feet below and shaken the entire building. I screamed and curled into a ball. The tremors continued for hours. Part 2 ends.